Hey, this is Steve at Dabble Lab, and in this tutorial I'm going to show you how to deploy Twilio functions using GitHub Actions. So automatically deploy functions from a GitHub repo. Normally when I'm working with Twilio functions on a Twilio app, I work in the web console. So like what we're looking at right now, and this has been recently updated, but you can just go in here and create a service and then create an example service here and build everything from in here, add all your functions, and I'll just say do this path1 function and do all of our coding in here. And this is great. And like I said, this is what I do most of the time, but there are certain cases where this is not the right option. And those would be cases where you're working on a complex app that's going to require multiple developers, or a mission critical app that just can't go down, or a really complex app that's going to be updated frequently. And in those scenarios, what I would do is use some sort of code repository. GitHub is what I would use, and some kind of continuous integration and continuous delivery setup, which unfortunately, as nice as the web console is, the Twilio web console, those are not features of the web console. And so that's the bad news. The good news is it's actually really pretty easy to set up with GitHub Actions, and that's what we're going to do today. So for starters, our goal here is to take a GitHub repository that's got function code in it and get that to push over here. And so I'm going to just delete this one that I created. So we're going to start with nothing, and then we will go and make that happen. And to make this easier, I created a project that you can just fork on GitHub. So if you go to github.com/dabblelab/twilio-runtime-github-actions, that's what we're looking at here. And I'm going to just fork this. There's steps that you can also go through here in the README, but we'll walk through it together since we're doing a video. I'm going to fork it to my personal GitHub account, and that will just take a second here. And the function that we're using is just really well, it's just like a hello world. It's super basic, so there's nothing special happening in here, but really what we're trying to do is just show how we do the deployment part, so we don't need anything special in there. And all the magic to do that is going to happen inside a GitHub or a GitHub action workflow. So the first thing that you need to do is enable workflows for the repository. So that's what this message is that I'm getting here, and I understand. And okay, so now workflows are enabled. And if you go back to the code, you'll notice there's a folder or a directory here, .github, and a subdirectory workflows. And in there, there's a file called main.yml, which is a text file in YAML format. And this is the GitHub Actions workflow that we're going to be executing. And if you haven't worked with GitHub Actions, they're actually pretty straightforward. Not super difficult to wrap your head around. This file, I'll walk through it. So this is the name of the workflow. I just called it Twilio CI. And GitHub Actions are event-driven, meaning that they get triggered and run based on an event that you define in the workflow. And in this case here, it's going to run on a push, and that's going to happen when something is pushed to the main branch, which in this repository, that is the only branch, this main branch here. So on a push to the main branch, this is going to run, and this is the jobs here. This could be one or more jobs. We just have one job for this example called build, and jobs run on runners, and runners are basically just servers that have the GitHub Actions runner software installed, but you don't have to set up a server because GitHub provides that for you. You could set it up if you wanted to. But in our case here, we're going to use Ubuntu, and it's our job step. Our job's going to run on Ubuntu, and the job has multiple steps that are going to use a couple of pre-made actions, and then we're going to run a command down at the bottom here. But just to get you oriented here, the first thing that we're doing is adding this checkout action to check out this repository, to be able to check out this repository from the GitHub code spaces, I think is how that works. And then this next workspace, the GitHub workspace, and the next action here sets up Node.js version 12. And then we down here use npm to install the dependencies for Twilio functions. And then this last piece here, this last step here, this is where the heavy lifting happens, at least with regard to pushing our code to Twilio. And to make that happen, I'm using the Twilio CLI and the serverless plugin for the Twilio CLI. And if you're not familiar with those, if you go to twilio.com/CLI, the CLI, or the command line interface, is a developer tool that you can use to work with Twilio from your terminal or command prompt. It is Node.js based, so you just install it using npm. And typically, you're going to use this from your local developer workstation, but in our case, we're going to use it on the runner. The other thing that I'm using is a plugin that the CLI supports, and this is a plugin from Twilio Labs, the serverless plugin. And I'm using this just to simplify the command that I have to run. You could do everything without the plugin, but this just kind of makes it simpler. And I'm using this command here, this deploy command, with a couple of options that we'll take a look at here. So the options, I'll just go like this. The options down here. So what's happening in this run command is we're using npm to install the Twilio CLI. And I'm just chaining commands together here so that we can do it all in one single run. And then we are going to install the Twilio Labs, the serverless plugin. And then we're going to basically run the Twilio CLI using the serverless deploy command and a couple of options here. This first option, the service name, this is the name that's going to be used when it gets deployed, the service gets deployed. And I've just got like a placeholder there, example deployed with GitHub Actions. And then the environment is the environment that the service, so services can have different environments, which are typically used for like doing like a dev version and a staging version and a production version. And I'm using an environment that I'm calling dev. And then finally this force, this is just going to force the code changes from the GitHub repository to prevail or overwrite any code changes that were made on the console side. So you want to be aware of that. And the only thing that we need to do to make this all work is set these three things up here. So these are three environment variables that we need to allow the Twilio CLI to access our Twilio account. So we need an account SID, an API key, and an API secret. So we're going to set these up as secrets in GitHub, which if you haven't done that before, you can do that either at your account level or the repository level. And we're going to do this at the repository level. So you would just go to settings and then secrets here. And then we're going to add a new secret. And the first one is going to be our Twilio account SID. And you can get the value for that here in your Twilio console from the dashboard, and then your account SID is over here on the right hand side. So just copy that, head back to your secrets, and we're going to use that as the value. And then we're going to do the same thing for the Twilio API key. And the value for this is going to require that we create a new API key. And so we're going to head back over to the Twilio console and then to settings and then API keys in here under settings. And we're going to create a new API key. And you can name it whatever you want. I'm going to just say example. Maybe I'm not. Oh my goodness. Okay, example key. And you can leave the key type as standard and then create key. I'm going to delete this key after, but you wouldn't want to show anybody, certainly not like in a video, the secret, but these are the values that we're going to need. We're going to need the SID, which is going to be the API key value, and the secret, which is going to be the Twilio API secret value. So I'm going to copy this first, go back over here for our Twilio API key and use that as the value. And then the last secret, the last GitHub secret is Twilio API secret. And the value for this, like I just mentioned, is going to be the secret from the API key that we just set up. So there we go. And at this point, we are all set. Everything that we need set up is set up. So let's see if we can make this work. We are going to just, all you need to make this work, like I mentioned when we were looking at the flow, is you just need to commit a change or push a change to the repository. To keep this simple, normally you would probably do this from your development environment. So if you use Visual Studio Code or something like that, but I'm going to just do this right from the browser here to keep it simple. And I'm going to change this. You can see in the code here, the default message is Hello Universe. I'm going to just change this to Hello World, and I'll do that. Just edit this like this. And when I commit these changes, it'll also push the changes. And that is, if everything's set up correctly, that's going to trigger our workflow. And we can see if that happened by going up here to Actions. And it did. You can see that the workflow, there's one result here, and it's queued right now. This will change to in progress, and it will work through all of those steps that we just went through. So installing Node.js, installing the NPM dependencies for the functions, and installing the CLI, installing the serverless plugin for the CLI, and then running that command. This action or workflow has been taking like about a minute to I don't know, like a minute and a half, but I think we'll just let this run and come back to it. And when we finish, what we're going to do is we're going to go over to our Twilio console and see if we can see this service deployed with the code inside. And then I will take you through how to make a couple of other things happen. So like within the Twilio runtime, in addition to functions, you can also deploy assets, and I'll show you how to do that. If this finishes successfully, we'll see a green check. That's that there. If it were to have failed, we would see a red X. And if you see a red X, you can click on this to get details about the why it failed to help you debug it. But since it's all working, we'll head back over to our Twilio console, and we'll go to Functions and Services. And there's our service that was deployed by our GitHub action workflow. Pretty cool, right? So there it is. We can open our function here, and you can see Hello World. And I mentioned the environment. So if you copy the URL here, I'm going to open a new tab and paste this. I'll show you. The host name is a combination of the service unique name, which in this case is example deployed with GitHub Actions, and then a random number, and then this is the environment name here that we passed over dev. And so let me show you how to change that. We looked at it, but that's probably the one thing that you'll want to change first. Maybe the environment and also the service name. So let's change those first. To change those, you would just edit the workflow file. So go into the workflow file, edit this, and we'll change this to something else. How about my cool app. And then I'll change the environment here to, I don't know, V1, how about? Actually, stage. Change it to staging. So we're gonna, with this change here, we're gonna create a new service called My Cool App, and we're gonna use an environment called stage. So I'll commit this. And then if we go back over here to actions, we can see that this commit was pushed and is now triggered the workflow, which is queued. And when this is done, which the last time took 1 minute and 24 seconds, then we'll see, or we should see, over here, a new service with the My Cool app name showing up. And 26 seconds in, while that's running, talk about a couple of other things in here. So in the services, I mentioned that in addition to publishing functions in the runtime, you can also publish assets, and assets are static files like HTML files or JavaScript files, images, maybe sound files, those kinds of things. And you can publish those by simply creating a new file in a folder called assets in the repository. Let's do that. This is done running. Let's look at that first. So we'll go back over here. And under services now, we should see our new service, this My Cool app. And what we'll do now is we'll publish some assets, so you can see how to do that. And we'll also publish some settings. So in the settings, you've got environment variables, which are commonly used in Node apps. And so we wouldn't want to add them here, because then if the workflow runs, they would be erased, I think. So we want to add those to our GitHub repository, and I'll show you how to do that. So let's go back over here, and what was I going to do first? Assets. All right. So we'll add some assets. And like I mentioned, this is pretty simple. You just want to add files to a folder called assets. So I'll create a file called data.csv, add a CSV file, and name, email. So simple CSV file with one record, me, in there. I'll commit that. And so now, again, we'll see our action triggered here, or our workflow triggered. And while that's running, we'll also look at adding environment variables. And to do that, it's also pretty simple. The default is you just add a file called .env, and that will add the environment variables. A lot of times the git ignore, especially if you use like the default git ignore settings for a node project, will ignore the .env, and typically that's what you want to do, especially if you've got like credentials or something in there, which you really don't want to do, and you definitely don't want to put those in a GitHub repository. So, but let me show you how this works anyhow. So you would go add a file, create a new file, and then just name the file .env like that. And then you would put your environment variables in here, and I'll do one like app name and my cool app. And then commit that. We'll go back. Let's check our action. This one's still running here. This is creating the asset. Now that that's finished, we'll check that out, make sure it's deployed. So now we can see that our asset has been deployed here also. And next we're going to look at our environment variable, and our dependencies would be like node modules. You can do, I'll show you that in a second too. So let's, while that other change is queuing or running. Let's take a look at, we didn't look at this. So we changed, whoops. Oh wait, I'm downloading the CSV file. That's not what I want to do. This is what I want. So this, you can see now, is my cool app, random number, and then the stage is used for the environment. We changed that before. So let's go back over here. Our environment variables have been pushed. So if we go over here and go to environment variables and then can view this, we can see that now we have an app name environment variable with my cool app. And the dependencies, these would be NPM modules, and you can make that happen very easily also by just adding the dependencies in your package.json. So if dependencies exist in here, they're going to get pushed over also. I've just got a dev dependency, so those don't get pushed. But if you had a standard dependencies, those would get migrated as well. And that is that's it, really. Hopefully this was helpful. This is a really simple CI/CD example. In a production environment, you'd probably have a lot more that you wanted to get done with workflows. Like in a production app, we would have like a workflow to check unit tests and do linting and all kinds of stuff. But it all works generally like this, what I showed you. But if you have any questions or comments, you can leave those and I'll respond just as quickly as possible. If you found this helpful, and if you'd like to see more tutorials on continuous integration and continuous delivery for Twilio, let me know. Just kind of putting this out there to see if there's any interest in it. But if you'd like a deeper dive, let me know. And if you did find this valuable, please like the video and subscribe at youtube.com/dabblelab. Thanks so much.